A man's item shall not be on a woman, and a man shall not wear a woman's garment. Whoever does such a thing is an abhorrence unto Adonai. Deuteronomy 22:5. It starts at birth. The girl gets the pink blanket, the boy gets the blue. What is the first thing people say when a baby is born? Is it a boy or a girl? In popular culture, gender ambiguity is a point of discomfort, to say the least. Any miscue is considered either funny or offensive. Any crossover at best avant-garde and at worst degenerative or subversive. Viewers of films such as The Crying Game and The Birdcage may see cross-dressers as either laughable or pathetic or both. Generally speaking, gender clues have been incorporated into clothing style, even for infants, in order to prevent misidentification. And so it would seem at first glance that our Torah holds such a concern, as our verse from Deuteronomy seems to prohibit cross-dressing. Let's look at the passage today and how it has been interpreted by our sages long ago. There are 3 clauses in this passage. A man's item shall not be on a woman, and a man shall not wear a woman's garment. Whoever does such a thing is an abhorrence unto Adonai. Note the lack of parallel structure in the first 2 clauses. We might have expected the verse to say, a man may not wear women's clothes, and a woman may not wear men's clothes. It is no violation of biblical Hebrew style to repeat the same words in a single sentence. So it is notable that we do not have matching phrases. The words man's and men come first in both clauses. And in order to allow that, the first clause is passive while the second is active. Moreover, the first clause talks of kligever, items or appurtenances, while the second clause uses the word simlat, dress or garment. It seems that the verse speaks of 2 different but related rules. Nevertheless, some of our sages read these 2 clauses as if they were statements of 2 identical rules, one applying to men, one applying to women. That is, they read it as if it says, a man or a woman shall not wear the items of the other gender. But most sages treat the 2 verses as distinct in intent. One of the most unusual interpretations is that of the early Aramaic source referred to as Pseudo-Yonatan, a translation of the Hebrew Bible that renders kligever, a man's items, as tzitzit, talit or prayer shawl, and tefillin, the phylacteries or prayer amulets worn by traditionally observant Jews. Since these items are required by halakha for men, but not required for women, they are quintessential men's items, and thus are the subject of this law, suggests Pseudo-Yonatan. A debate has been raging for the past 2,000 years over whether women may wear talit and tefillin, and if so, which bracha, which blessing, they say when putting them on. In the course of that debate, the minority who forbid women from wearing talit and tefillin do not cite this interpretation or this verse as proof of their position. Moreover, none of the mainstream halakhic legal interpretations of this verse follow the midrash of Pseudo-Yonatan. Thus, this interpretation, while interesting, has no legal weight. In another attempt to identify the quintessential men's items, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, quoted in the Talmud, says, "What is the proof that a woman may not go forth with weapons to war?" Then he cites our verse, which he reads to say, "A warrior's gear may not be put on a woman." He reads kligever as the homograph kli gibor, meaning warrior's gear. The same understanding is followed by Midrash Mishlei, which contends that the biblical character Yael in the book of Judges kills General Sisera with a tent pin instead of a sword in order to comply with this law. It would have been unladylike for her to use a sword, worse, a violation of the law, because a sword is a man's tool, and so the righteous woman of valor finds an alternate weapon. While this interpretation does not prevail in later halakhic discussion, it does appear, and so it must be regarded as a viable, albeit minority view, as to the intent of the first clause. This interpretation has even been cited in the debate over exemption for women from military conscription in modern Israel. A common understanding of our verse in exegetical and halakhic literature is stated by Rashi, one of the most highly regarded Talmudists and biblical commentators of all time, born about 1,000 years ago. Kli gever, a man's item, should not be on a woman, that she should not appear as a man, so she can go out among men, for this is only for the purpose of adultery, says Rashi. Likewise, Rashi says, Simlat isha, a man shall not wear a woman's garment, so he can go and be among the women. Rashi explains the moral force of this, toeva, abhorrence. The Torah forbids only garments that may lead to toeva, abhorrence. This comment appears in Rashi's Torah commentary, so it is not clear whether Rashi is defining the reason for the law or alternatively its scope. Only a few sources spell out what is meant by women's clothing and men's clothing. Women normally wear colorful clothes, men wear white clothes. Most sources leave the particulars undefined because they realized that while gender distinction in dress is almost universal, the particulars are a matter of local fashion trends. As the Tur, roughly 1300 Common Era, the predecessor code of the Shulchan Aruch puts it, a woman should not dress in clothes specifically for men, lefi minhag hamakom, according to the local fashion. The intent of the law in this view is to prevent men and women from associating with what would normally be a single-sex group of the other sex under false pretenses for purposes of, or in circumstances that are liable to lead to, heterosexual adultery. Rashi seems to limit the prohibition to this case. Thus, men and women cross-dressing in other circumstances might not be prohibited, at least if it can be assured that the abhorrence will not result. This is the analysis followed by the Shulchan Aruch, the 16th century law code that has become a standard law text for most of the traditionally observant Jewish people. In its discussion of the laws of the festival of Purim, the code says men and women may cross-dress on Purim because it is for the purposes of gaiety, of simcha, not for adultery. Given the context, there's no danger that such cross-dressing will lead to heterosexual adultery. The danger of cross-dressing, according to the analysis followed here by Rashi and the Shulchan Aruch, is that it might allow men to enter women's groups and women to enter men's groups. In societies in which gender segregation was widely observed, this subterfuge was seen as a real danger, and that was even before the production of Yentl. It is stated this way in Sefer HaChinuch. The root of this mitzvah, this commandment, is to keep us from sexual sin. And there is no doubt that if men and women's clothing were the same, they would mix, and the earth would be filled with impropriety. Today, the concern would be that men or women would sneak into the other gender's locker rooms or bathrooms. Given that men and women in our society mix freely in other settings, it is hard to see how heterosexual adultery is a particular danger of what is called cross-dressing. Some commentators have noted, however, that this understanding, as explained by Rashi and the Shulchan Aruch, does not seem to be based on the language of the verse. If the Torah wanted to prohibit men from going out among women in women's dress, it could have said that. This context of social mixing of men and women is imposed by later readers on the text. A second interpretation of the verse has gained the widest acceptance among the sages as reflected in mainstream legal codes. The Shulchan Aruch says that the prohibition of a man wearing simlat isha, women's dress or women's fashion, refers to wearing women's hairstyle, which, depending on local custom, means specifically to shave one's underarm or pubic hair. Men may not shave their armpits and genital regions as women do unless it is customary locally for men to do that. Men may, however, shave arm and leg hair in any case. Other commentators likewise relate the Simlati Shah clause only to removing underarm and pubic hair. This interpretation may seem far from the apparent intent of the verse in Deuteronomy. In part, that is because the legal sections of the Torah use terms that have technical meaning to those well-versed in biblical law. In addition, the history of legal interpretation in Jewish law is not unlike that of other legal systems in that judges ultimately must apply the laws to real-life situations and are thus forced to define the terms in ways that will make sense within the framework of their codes, case law, and social reality. It appears that the scope of this law, as interpreted by our sages, is limited. It is designed especially to prohibit men and women from misrepresenting themselves as the other gender with the aim of illicit heterosexual activity. The mitzvah does not prohibit cross-dressing for the festival of Purim. It also would probably not prohibit cross-dressing in a private setting or in a theatrical purpose, nor would it prohibit such dress when it would not mislead others as to the gender of the person under the clothes. The third clause of the verse, whoever does such a thing is an abhorrence unto Adonai, has been understood by our sages to mean that it is the forbidden act that is an abhorrence, not the person. The wording of this clause is merely a figure of speech and idiomatic usage and should not be taken to refer to the person himself or herself or themselves. The Torah's concern in this verse, then, is not with creating or reinforcing gender differences per se, but in preventing gender associations of clothing or possibly body hair that already exist from being used to deceive others for purposes leading to sexual immorality. The key here seems to be deception for illicit purposes. Indeed, this law in Deuteronomy, this verse, exists in the context of laws against deceit. In American society, the fashion trend over the past decade seems to be toward a larger body of unisex apparel. At the movie theater, the teenage women selling popcorn are wearing suits and ties. Jeans are common to all genders, as are sweaters and jackets. It is much more common for genuine, intentional transvestites to be accepted publicly. A person's gender can less easily be judged by their clothing, and many people like it that way. While the legal interpretations of this verse in Deuteronomy have been diverse, most of Jewish legal discussion has not taken the verse to suggest a blanket ban or condemnation of what we today call cross-dressing. This discussion is meant to be informational only, not determinative of Jewish law for this verse or for the issue of cross-dressing generally. Persons who are Jewish should abide by the legal interpretation of this verse as it is understood by their local community as explained by their rabbi. This discussion does not make any claim for the permissibility or restriction of cross-dressing based on other biblical verses or post-biblical rabbinic legislation. If you want to learn more about what the Torah teaches on this subject and others, go and study.